So I've had a good run in my Mazda over the past few days. I've had mixed feelings about it. If I were to compare it to an MG, I think an MG is more fun to drive. That's just my subjective impression. It's a completely different car, of course. The MG has the engine behind the driver. They call it a mid-engined car, and I think it is pretty much it's forward of the rear axle, and that gives a certain type of feel. And then at the front of the car is really light, because all you have there is the spare wheel over the front axle. There's nothing under the bonnet, under the hood, and the tires aren't quite as wide as they are on the Mazda. So it seems to me to be a bit more manoeuvrable, a bit quicker on its feet in terms of steering. But the problem with the MG is precisely because of the rear engine. The cooling system is suspect and is temperamental because there are long cooling lines running from the radiator at the front of the car right to the back of the engine, and plenty of possibility for airlocks in the system. And also the engine position makes for a slightly, a longer linkage to the gearbox. So the gear shift, I think it's not so bad, but it's not exactly, intuitive. And mind you, nor is the Mazda. The people that I took them to, they said, well, they're all notchy. The gear change, I'd expected something a little bit easier. It's fine. It needs to be got used to, like everything. But the Mazda is so much more of a finished car in a way, because they haven't made the MGs now for about 15 years or so. The last model rolled off the production lines under Chinese ownership. I don't know whether a lot of it was made in China. And I'm sure they're very good, the last ones. But spares becomes, more of a concern. And one of the things I'd like to do is drive to Italy. And I would be more anxious driving to Italy in, a pretty old car, like in terms of design, like the MG, than with the Mazda, because I'm guessing that anywhere I end up, there will be a Mazda dealership or somebody who can fix Mazdas, whereas with an MG, it's becoming quite a specialist area, and there's plenty of people in this country, and particularly around Birmingham, but internationally less so. I don't know whether I've made the right choice. Certainly, the Mazda is a very smart car. It looks nice outside the house. I'm not a huge fan of ragtops. They are, exposed to the weather, and they can quickly start to look tatty. So having a hard top, or the retractable hard top, is an absolute bonus. And I mean, the car's great. It goes really fast. Everything seems to be working. I just want to get the steering and the tracking sorted out, if that's going to be possible. And it seems it's not that easy, but I don't know. I think what I'll do is I'll ask one of the guys from the Mazda shop to drive it and see how he feels, because you need a comparison to see how things are working. It could be working perfectly, but my vote still goes to the Mazda, despite some misgivings, because I just can't be dealing with the temperamental issues surrounding the MG now, and all the difficult fixes, and check this and check that and check the other. The Mazda seems, more of a sorted car. And of course, it's been in production for a long time, and it's still in production. And kudos to Mazda for doing that. somebody had to produce an economical sports car, and it used to be MG, and they the baton was taken from them. I don't know whether it was given up gladly. Um, Unionization, bad management, all the rest of it. It's a great pity, really. Um, I'm sorry to see, that the car wasn't reproposed, but it hasn't been. So that's the state of transport. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about is patriarchy, which is something that's been on my mind quite a lot, particularly since speaking to my sister a few days ago, who assured me that the whole concept of patriarchy was unscientific, and it's just really, based on historic cultures. I mean, what she means is the Bible, but she won't say that because she knows that I'm a believer. So, she doesn't want to offend me, and I appreciate that. It wouldn't offend me anyway. I know what people think, and it is, of course, the Bible does promote or promote it. It describes a patriarchal society. But I believe that patriarchy is absolutely scientific. Um, all societies have been patriarchal since the dawn of time, as far as we can understand. As far as my understanding of what would they be called, anthropologists perhaps, have concluded. I know that there are some tales of Amazon cultures where the women were playing a more prominent role, but I think a lot of those are more just tales than anything else. Around the world, all cultures are sort of male-headed and male-driven, and have been since the dawn of time. And really, it's atheism that has brought forth this idea of parity, as it were. Either men or women can be in charge of society. It doesn't really matter, and that's absolutely false. Um, because we have completely different incentives and drives. But it is the atheism, I think, that started it, because of course the atheists have no love and respect and fear and honor for the Father, and the Father God, and so they've woven this web of fantasy, woke culture fantasy, where men and women are equal in. I mean, I don't promote inequality, as it were. I mean, it's just that we're equal in different ways, but they will have us equal. Anything you can do, I can do better. That's the old song, and it's not true. But women can do plenty, of course, but the idea that we would be placed in competition is just ludicrous. And I'm just so fed up of being criticized, all my life just because I'm a guy, and it's just assumed that my behavior is somehow entitled or cruel or wicked, and just being judged by it. And you know this has come back to bite women, hasn't it? Because the nagging wives and the annoying girlfriends and all the behaviors that accompany this concept of forming partnerships with one's, you mate, and being on the same level and all the rest of it, have those things have led a lot of men, or are leading a lot of men, of course, to just say, well, I'm not bothered with it. I'm quite happy to proceed on my own, and we can do that because we men are the generators of wealth, and the fundamental generators of ideas. That's what we do. and so we can lead a fulfilling life without needing to have a woman. But whereas the same isn't really true for women, they always going to need a man somewhere, although they might not be able to see the man, because a lot of the women that have gone down that route are doing work which is financed by government. So it's not immediately clear, but who's footing the bill. But as governments are beginning to, I would like to think, shrink in size, but I think I might be being a bit optimistic. But certainly, many local governments and city councils are bankrupt in the UK. They just can't continue to generate all this tremendous wealth and employment as they've been doing, and hiring female, officers to look after this aspect and that aspect of the city's life and create ideologically based committees. These are employing, many of the people working in executive positions in these types of structures are actually women. And as they're taken down, then women have fewer employment opportunities. You see, in the olden days, women would work, and women can do very good work, of course. And there are many, possibilities. But if they worked for a company or something, then that would be um, the company would be run by a man and owned by a man, and a man would be in charge. And so it was. And now we have these slightly false structures where the women are in charge, but they're not ultimately in charge because they answer to government, and government is just a construct. So when that all comes crashing down, I was speaking to my neighbour. His daughter is involved in some kind of cultural diversity or gender diversity consulting and working for the public sector. Herself, she is a lesbian in her preferences, which is, I don't. It's everybody's choice, I suppose. Doesn't really matter. And she seemed to lead a very, very unsettled life from the little I know of her. But I don't know her well. Although she's been visiting regularly, we've never really chatted. I like to chat, but the opportunity hasn't arisen. Um, she's a pretty big woman, also. There's something else, like, come on, man. You don't have to be huge, but so it is these days. And the funding has been withdrawn apparently from her particular neck of the woods. And so the company that she set up, and she's wealthy, working, earning thousands a day for some of this consulting work, but it's dried up. And I wonder whether this isn't a trend that we're going to start seeing really across the board as God exercises his will upon the earth, and as believers start to speak out. And I think a lot more of my brothers are speaking out, and of course many of my sisters are coming to understand this, although I haven't actually met any of them. I know they're out there. The women, the only women that I found really receptive, or with any measure of humility in my travels over the past few years, have been in a couple of cases of women who I've met who were sleeping on the streets, and I've started chatting to them and had some quite long conversations. And I suppose because of their very poor economic position, you could say they're not quite as cocky and brawling contentious as some of the better kept ladies of our society. Maybe that's part of the thing. And I'm sure that people, women in woke culture would throw up their hands in horror of the idea that poverty is something that would be used, as it were, to tame the shrew. But it is a true thing, of course, because you've got the passport bros, these guys that are going over to um, the Philippines and Thailand, Vietnam, and places, Costa Rica, even men of my age who are able to find a young enough woman to have a child. That's quite a serious consideration, isn't it? It just would be very difficult in this country, I think, or any Western, any European country or the US, Australia. You wouldn't, it's not something that would be possible for a 70-year-old man or nearly 70 years old to find a woman of childbearing age to give him a son. But that's something that I do aspire to even now. Um, it's vain, it may be, but I feel that I've failed my bloodline because I haven't produced a son, and this is no disrespect to my daughter, of course, because she's a girl. That's how it is. And if she does have children, she's thinking of not having children, but if she does have children, they will be in the bloodline of her husband and not mine. That's how bloodlines work. They've worked that way since the dawn of time, since Adam and Eve, I would say, being a Bible believer, or populations that existed, the pre-Adamite races. But I suppose evolutionary believers can follow a similar sort of interpretation. That's how it's always been, that bloodlines are run through the male side. I've heard that in Iceland there's some slight difference, but I can't remember what it was. I think the names perhaps take from the mother. But the bloodline is important, and the Bible shows that it's important. We can follow the bloodlines in the Bible. The bloodline of Jesus Christ, of course, is very carefully mapped out, and so it focuses our attention on these matters. The bloodline of kings is something, I think, which is important also, and we've seen biblical problems there with Athaliah, when a woman decided to take charge of the situation. It didn't go particularly well for anybody, and particularly for her in the long run. I'm not saying that men can't make a mess of things, but it has to be recognized. If we're going to be punished for our mistakes, as it were, and we will be, then, at least we have to be able to act without hindrance and nagging and, contention in every single step. This is not useful, and I think many of us, and many of my brothers, are just preferring to live a single life, and it's a perfectly logical and reasonable thing. You can have a beautiful life and enjoyable and all the rest of it. You just don't need to have a nagging woman there telling you that it's wrong, whatever you thought of, or somehow shaming you or trying to erode your self-confidence. Oh, I've had all of that I can take in my life, and I'm not taking any more really. And the only way to be sure of it is to stake out pretty clear boundaries. God bless this morning.